All right, here we are again, Bookworm Games. This is episode 13. I'm joined by Steve and Abel. Hey, Steve.
Hey Wes, how's it going?
Good. You're coming through loud and clear. So we were all set to record last week, and then I was traveling, and you were busy with work, and it just didn't happen. But we're back here on Memorial Day. Gonna So we were just talking about speed runs, and I was thinking back to when we used to play video games together. Which one of us was better at video games, Steve? I think that's the first thing we need to clear up here.
I think you might have to talk to our friend Michael, who we
Oh,
used to get money from for beating stars from Super Mario 64. Uh, but I,
like which one of us made more money? That's how we would figure it out. Yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, exactly. Because I think we got $1 per star, so I think that
Okay.
would have been a good way to figure out who was better.
All right, all right. So we'll consult our piggy banks and our friend Michael from soccer. Yeah. But okay. But then we've got speaking of that, we've got a standing agreement that the first of us to make $1 million is going to share half of it with the other. How much of it? I forgot already.
I mean, I guess it depends on who makes the million first. If you do, then definitely half. If I do, I think it was only like 25%. But
Oh,
no, I think
no, no,
it
no.
was 50%. I guess now it's
Okay.
recorded for all eternity.
There we go. So now that we've cleared those two little matters up, okay. So when we first like started playing Earthbound, this to me is like one of those things that's kind of lost in the mists of time. But like we were friends from playing soccer together, and we would hang out and we'd have these sleepovers where we would hang out and just play video games all night. Um, was Earthbound, was that a game that we were playing like when we were really little, or at what point do you remember when we started to play that game?
Yeah, I think we were probably around 8 or 9 when we started
Okay.
to play it, and I don't think
Yeah.
that was really one of the games that we played super late into the
Okay.
night. I remember us being a little bit older when we actually were able to stay up all night. I still remember, I think it was Final Fantasy X,
Oh
um,
yeah.
special weapons. Earthbound, to me, at least my fondest memories were sitting either in your bedroom or in your living room because you owned the game,
Yeah.
eating goldfish, and I actually just enjoyed watching you play um, for a
Oh
while
man.
because I will admit that you were much better than me at RPGs. Um,
Yes.
so I will concede that you were much better at that than I. Um,
Thank you. Well, wait. So the reason that I was if I was better, it was because I had friends who were older than me and taught me how to play those games. You remember Greg and Donald, right? Like the neighbor kids.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
they would play, and then these neighbors that used to live next to us for a while, who were their age also, they would play those games like Final Fantasy II, or what was called
Right.
Final Fantasy II in the US. They would play that when I was like really little. So I would watch them play that, and I would be like, oh, that's like the coolest thing, because these are the kids I looked up to. And so I think that made me want to like they made me want to learn how to read better, because so much of like RPG games, which they seem to like so much, is just like reading text and like listening to what people say. Um, and then just like, yeah, just the amount of time and patience maybe to like sit there and like figure out what you're supposed to do next sometimes. I don't know, like what do you mean? How can you be better at an RPG? I want to figure that out first of all.
Well, I
Yeah.
think you grew up in an environment that I think was atypical in the U.S. at that time, which
Yeah.
was you had friends that introduced you to RPGs. I don't think RPGs were necessarily big in
Oh, yeah.
America. In my household and in my neighborhood, it was primarily platformers. So we're playing Super Mario World, Super
Yeah.
Mario 3. I really enjoyed Punch Out. So to me, video games were just kind of about getting to the end point as quickly as possible. It
Uh-huh.
wasn't necessarily, there are puzzles in platformers, but they're not the same kind of puzzles that pop up in RPGs. So for me, it was more just about, again, it was just kind of getting it done as quickly as possible. And in RPGs, you have to explore, talk
Yeah.
to people, kind of figure out the clues that they're dropping. And I didn't have the patience for that, and I didn't enjoy that as much as you did. So
Yeah.
and it was just a lack of exposure
Yeah. I think that's
to
like,
that genre at the time. It wasn't until Final Fantasy VII
oh
uh,
yeah.
we got our PlayStation, and I used to watch my brother play that for hours on end, and then our stupid mad
Right.
memory card got corrupted multiple times, like 20 hours. So I was pretty familiar with the first like 20 hours of Final Fantasy VII. Um,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
yeah, so that I kind of just grew up with, and then competitive games. So you had Mario Kart, Street Fighter, uh,
Yeah.
you know, some kind. I think it was RBI baseball or something like that. I don't know,
All
but
right.
yeah. So yeah, it wasn't really RPG centric for me.
Yeah, but so yeah, speaking of like Final Fantasy VII, that's kind of the big one that maybe like bridged those two worlds for a lot of people. Like if you grew up playing video games like Mario and Street Fighter and you're kind of like into the action elements of the game and like efficient gameplay and all that like sort of thing. And then you sort of see I remember that's one of the first games that I ever saw like commercials for on TV and of like the little cutscene with the train going around Midgard City, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this thing? Um, I was like fascinated by that, and yeah, I remember that your brother had that game before I did. I don't know if I even had a PlayStation until I was like oh, I have to like get this game and play it. So yeah, yeah, that was a
I
big
just want to minor correction.
do it.
I actually got that for Christmas.
Oh, that's
Never had heard of it before. I think it was one of the games where my brother said, "Oh yeah, Steve will like that. Buy that for him." And then he confiscated it and just played it in his room and let me in whenever.
when he needed
Whenever.
you to replay the first 20 hours, he would have you come in.
Right.
Yeah. Big brothers, man. So I was a big brother and you were a little brother. Maybe that's part of like the secret of our success playing games together. So I'm starting to see like, okay, I had a little more patience for certain kinds of games, and I think I would concede that you had more skill. You could always beat me at like Mario Kart and Super Smash Brothers. Like those games, you're better at those. Um,
Well, I think it's just more. I probably played against people with better motor skills than I did, so I kind of had to adapt. It's like iron
yeah.
sharpens iron, and it's kind of like as a quick aside, you used to kick my butt at Super Smash Brothers for the N64, and then I went to college, played it, almost failed out my freshman year because of it. Played it for probably 6 or 7 hours a day, and came back and smoked you. So,
Yeah. Well,
it's just I think it's just the level of competition that you're playing with.
here's the memory that's burned into my head. So, okay, Ape Escape. So we played it for like hours and hours. We played Ape Escape. We were like, we're gonna get like 100% completion on this game. It's gonna be awesome. And we did a really good job like taking turns and like playing through whatever. And then we get to the very last, the last monkey that has to be caught for that 100%. And you caught the monkey. You jerk. Uh,
Well, I think didn't we later find out that that wasn't actually the last monkey?
I know, but like that's a technicality. Yeah, yeah. You still all right. But so okay, Earthbound. Earthbound, you had a copy of that and you lent it to one of our other friends from the soccer team. Did he ever
Yes,
talk to
former
you again?
friends. Former
Right.
friends.
You never heard from him again, right?
Well, okay, so I guess the story was I misplaced it. I tore my house. Well, I didn't misplace it. I couldn't find it.
Uh-huh.
Tore my house apart. Realized like one day I just like woke up and I was like, I lent that video game to said friend,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh man, this sucks. Like I'll never see him again. But then in college, I saw him at a bar,
Okay.
and I approached him and I said, hey, what's up, buddy? How's it going? And he's like, oh man, long time no see. And I was like, yeah, man, you have my Earthbound. Can I get that back? Then I never heard from him again.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um,
Well, it's like worth
yeah,
a lot of money, right? Like maybe he sold it, maybe I don't know. Maybe he just
yeah, I don't
knows
know.
it's the greatest game ever and will never part with it now that he's got his grimy little hands on it.
Yeah, well, I did get it for $5 from the Gaithersburg Funkoland. You know, they used to have the video game stores with just like bins full of
Yeah.
SNES cartridges, and that was one that I got for $5 after watching you play it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I want to start to, play this game from start to finish too. So
Yeah.
that's what I did, and I was able to beat it before I parted with it. So at least I got to experience it.
Yeah. Well, so it's like for a while there, it was very rare, and it wasn't on the virtual console, but there was this network of people who had these experiences of the game and like really loved it. And so on starmen.net, right, like there's this online community that grows up around the game. And they work really hard to try to get Nintendo of America to finally release EarthBound and its prequel and its sequel. And I know that at least the first two are now available on the virtual console. Is Mother 3 or aka EarthBound 2, is that like something you can play on a Nintendo system at this point? I don't actually know.
Not legally.
That's really sad though. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you can always import one and play it if you know Japanese, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's just been caught up. I don't really understand Nintendo of America's thought process on it. I feel like it would be a huge money seller. I believe that whoever did the translation said that Nintendo could use it if they ever release it.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Right. The
but
fan translation, yeah, is out there and like you can like experience the game, but in some way, yeah, it's different when it's this kind of a fan led thing versus the actual, licensed product, right? Like that those are just that's a different world. And and part of that too, like to go back to Final Fantasy VII or whatever, right? Like that was a thing where Nintendo had this great relationship with Square, who made all those Final Fantasy games, and then they weren't going to have the technology, right, to like be able to provide the new Final Fantasy, and so Square had to go and find someone else to do it, right? So like thinking about the connection between the technology and the story that you're trying to tell, or like the kind of game that you want to release, um, like that sort of thing. I guess these days is just it's become so much more you can just like access things so easily now. Um, I'm curious, I guess, about like how how does somebody still like for me, maybe it's just because I grew up with it, but like how do you still have this kind of attachment to Nintendo or to Square or to some of these like big names that I still feel like there's a difference though between playing the fan made version on an emulator versus like playing the real game released by the name company, Like, do you see what I'm saying there? I know there's a lot of different stuff.
yeah, that was kind of all over the place. I think for me, um, I just love Nintendo games.
Yeah.
So, and I know that they're very stringent with their uh, allowable use on different platforms, and they've been known to shut down YouTubers for copyright
Yeah.
infringements who do like let's plays and stuff like that. Um, I, I don't know. To me, there is a. I've played on emulators before. I've played on Steam. There, for some reason, there isn't that same kind of nostalgic feeling of just playing on a Nintendo console.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Super Nintendo Mini that came out, uh, and to me, there's nothing better than having that feeling of pressing the on button, having the games boot up, picking it and playing it with a legitimate Super Nintendo controller on a TV. Um,
Yeah, and that's so strange though, right? It's like how can so this is like a real question too. Like how can you love something that is that's like such it's just a bunch of like electronic, circuits. Like you can have it played so there's something about the physical console, it sounds like. It's like people who talk about the difference between reading an ebook versus like having the actual paper book. It seems like it's something like that. and maybe it is a nostalgia thing, like a loyalty thing in a way, right? To the name, to the company, or the that feeling of like, this is what, you have like those sensory memories of like, yeah, sitting and playing that game and like eating goldfish, like you said. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Those are like very strong memories. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, there's definitely um, a strong attachment to video games. I mean, I still have all of my video games from back when I started I guess I started getting my video games when I was like 3 years old.
Oh my
We
gosh.
had a Super Nintendo. I have like Sesame Street 1, 2, 3. I learned math and stuff on those kinds of games. Uh,
Yeah.
I had a bunch of friends whose parents, every time there was a new console, they made their kid sell their games to finance the new ones, and it's like you're getting pennies on the dollar. Like it's not
Yeah.
even worth it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I still have my original Pokemon games and the boxes, and I don't know. I think it's just a strong nostalgic feel. I like to have something physical.
Right.
I've actually uh, seen a YouTuber and I followed his lead. You can get these plastic cases
Uh-huh.
and get the old game box art, print that out, put it in the sleeve, and it's almost like going to Blockbuster again, which is another
Yeah.
feeling that was like very nostalgic for. I
Yeah.
sit around on Netflix and I can't find a movie and it's digital. Nothing seems interesting, but back in the day, going to Blockbuster, I feel like I could always find something. Um,
Just like browsing in the actual place. Yeah, there's something different about that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Maybe it's just the amount of effort that you have to go through. You feel like you're actually doing something,
Right.
or maybe since something is so on demand, you feel like you can neglect it now because you can get back to it whenever you want to.
Mhm.
At Blockbuster, it was like either you pick a movie and a video game now, or we're not coming back. Like you had to make a decision now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. It's really weird because my video games take up a lot of space. A lot of them I haven't touched in years. Probably will never actually play them again.
Yeah.
Uh, but my parents are actually moving, and it's kind of sad because I have to figure out what I'm going to do with my video game collection, and throwing it out is not an option.
Right.
So it's probably going to be a storage bin somewhere where I'm going to be spending, $50 a month just to store my video games. So
And but it's so worth it. Yeah. Yeah. The
yeah,
the YouTubers, so like you said, there's like a really strong uh community of people who are interested in collecting games, who are interested in speed runs and like mastering like the absolute like greatest skill level of skill, like consummate artistry at playing these games. It's like insane to watch these people. But then there's, and like I mentioned, there's the social element now. Like you can get on starman.net or whatever, other fan site and meet other people through that and talk about the game, whatever. So of all those kinds of things, like uh, I'm curious, like, would you ever start your own little like YouTube or like podcast or something about video games, or are you more interested in just like kind of, I don't know, maybe it's like a thing you don't have time to do, or what are your thoughts about that?
no, I mean, I actually have another friend who lives nearby me who also is a video game collector.
Yeah,
Um, and we've talked quite a bit about trying to make a podcast, or I've been telling him that I'm going to make a YouTube channel or stuff like that
yeah,
about video games. I think the problem is it's YouTube and all these podcasts are so saturated
yeah,
these days. It's hard to find a niche anymore. Um, I mean, it seems like almost if I found something unique that I thought that I could present to the masses in a informative, funny, you know, way,
yeah,
uh, I might be willing to do it. But as of right now, it's all been done.
yeah,
I think even for your review, and I keep on sending you them, but Earthbound, it's been done to death. It's like it's how many more videos can YouTubers make that are interesting that go over the same aspects of,
exactly.
which is actually one of the reasons why I really appreciate your podcast, because you're exploring areas of the game that no one else has touched. So it's new, it's fresh, it's not the same stories about oh, the inventory system is bad. Okay, yeah, I heard that from the other guy who reviewed the game.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a steep learning curve. Yeah, like okay, like I've heard that too. So
The thought of I like the thought of like each person. I still think that there's like each person who plays the game, I think would be able to bring something new to it just based on like your experiences in other games that you've played or other, for me it's like a lot of books and kind of academic stuff that I've read that I sort of bring to like try to connect with things that I see going on in Earthbound. So I do think I want to encourage you to like to think about it more, and whether it's on the collecting side or whether it's on the review side or in some kind of way, I think it would be cool because that does like it's more than just like having that storage space full of old games. It's like they're still like you're doing something with them. You're sharing that with people in some way. Yeah, I don't know. I hope that there's an audience, but even if not, like I think it's just kind of I think it's cool to take what was this big part of growing up and like looking at it and seeing what's really of value there and like how does this still sort of matter, I think you'll find stuff like when you really look at it. So um but then so you recently sent me the Angry Video Game Nerds review, which is, it's in some ways it's just another review, but it's like he's so famous and he puts so much time into his videos that it's I don't know how many millions of views that thing has now, but a ton. Um, so what was I have some thoughts about this too, but what were some parts of his analysis that you found like either new or like particularly well done about Earthbound?
well, I some of his theories I really appreciated. I think he said something about Buzz actually being Ness from the future coming back to kind of get his journey started. I don't know how much I believe that. I thought that was an interesting new take that I hadn't really thought of or seen anyone else present. And I really appreciated the way that he examined Magicant and the going through, and he pointed out the one quote, I forget what it was, but
About the snowman, right? Like the snowman, you made me one winter's day or something. Yeah, yeah,
and then I melted, but I still exist in your memory.
yeah.
Something like that. That was I don't even know if I talked to the snowman. I'm not even sure if I knew that you could talk to the snowman during the game. But the fact that he pointed that out and it seemed so poignant, especially given, the environment that you're in. I mean, aside from maybe Moonside, that was obviously the trippiest part of the game with the constantly changing backgrounds and
Yeah.
all the people that you run into. But I really liked his examination of, I guess, memories and all that stuff that had to do with the game.
I think that's what I found the most interesting about it too. The way so he's like really good at making videos, and so the way he kind of did it was to like remake, like a version of Magicant for himself, kind of, right? And he was like walking through this sort of it looks almost like a side-scrolling video game world. He was like walking along and he was like meeting these like characters from his own, mental world and talking to them, interacting with them. So I thought that was like so interesting because he really nailed that. That's like the game in a way reflecting this very process of what we're doing right now is like talking about our memories of playing video games. Well, that's where the video game is like looking at your memories as a character within the game. So it's like it's almost this kind of reflection, of what you're actually doing as you play the game. And so he made it in his with his own kind of skill set. He recreated that and made it his own. And I just think that's such a cool sort of new way to think about video games. There's more to them than just like entertainment or sort of pastime. I think there's more there. And I don't want to. It's tough because my tendency is to like try to get like maybe too, like you said, like the theories that you come up with when you start thinking about stuff too much, they might be a little bit like over the top and like overthinking things. I sort of I want to like try to avoid that if possible, but there is sort of a fine line there to like maybe there maybe there only is something there if you do sort of create it. It's not necessarily something the game developer intended, but it's still like a valid way to think about the game. And I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I was talking to my friend back in the day who was really into art,
Uh-huh.
and we went and we were looking at it, and she was kind of explaining what she thought about it, and I said like, well, do you think the artist intended to do this? Like, what, like all these like little strokes and all? And she's like, well, does it matter?
Uh-huh.
And that really resonated with me. It doesn't really matter if the artist intended to do something if you see it and you can interpret it in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, who knows what Etoy was really thinking when he was making this game. I mean, who knows? He's apparently one of the most biggest Renaissance men in Japan. He has like such a charmed life, it seems. He's on like, Iron Chef one week. He's writing newspaper or articles or short stories. He's making video games. He does everything. So I don't know how much he actually intended
Yeah.
for this kind of self-reflection in the game and this kind of meta
Yeah.
message.
Right.
But I don't think it matters at the end of the day because it clearly, with Starman.net and all the fans and all uh, the praise, it resonated with people, and I think that the fetus theory holds any kind of water, and anyone who actually entertains that is
I want to go.
immediately dismissed.
Yeah, that didn't convince me, but even more so like at a certain point, I don't know if it's just a matter of like trying to say something sort of provocative. Like it's interesting, okay, but it's also I think there is a point where you draw the line and it's like, well, that's just more like getting a reaction out of people at that point. I guess I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe he really like genuinely is kind
No,
of
that
going.
I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but like that's a theory that's been around for a long time. And I think
Whoa.
he was just kind of addressing it, and if I remember correctly, he basically dismissed it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like but I mean, I think that as players and people who enjoyed uh, the game, we don't have to. If someone sees something and we don't, like, we can dismiss it. That's fine.
Yeah, that's true. That's
It's all
true.
about our personal experience.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that like I think when I think about it as a teacher though, it's like there is a real danger of if you come up with a certain interpretation that's so like distracting or like so undermines the kind of virtues of the game, like it is kind of dangerous to include that in your lesson, so to speak. So it's like it's tough to think about. Maybe to think about it that way is taking it like another step. Like if you were to have Earthbound be a instead of like reading books all day in school, you played video games for part of your school day. This is what I imagine. So like we play Earthbound as a class. Like what are the things that you want to focus on with that class? Well, probably not the Gigas is like the cosmic infant destruction theory, So yeah.
No, I get you. It's kind of like what we're going through in our political and
Yeah,
fake news kind of
exactly.
environment.
Exactly.
If you start flooding the ideas with these falsehoods or outlandish claims, it really muddies the water for
Yeah.
the better theories, and it is distracting. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, before we run out of time, I did want to also thank you again for like you kind of introduced me to the idea of the virtual novel, which was, I guess a thing that's been around for a while in different forms, but especially the 999 series. So, have you heard any more news about that? Are they making more of those games? Did they release the the last of those, or is that sort of like finished up at this point?
So yeah, there's 999, and then Virtue's Last Reward, and then Zero Time Dilemma. It's a trilogy.
Yeah.
Everything that I've heard is that Zero Time Dilemma was the last game in the series. I've been checking the news. The creator slash author of the series has like a new project coming out. I haven't checked in on it recently. There was speculation that it might have to do with 999, maybe not necessarily a direct sequel, but potentially like a spin-off or something like that. But as far as I know, that story is complete, as satisfying or as unsatisfying as some people found it. You know, there was quite a bit of backlash when Zero Time Dilemma came out. I will say that.
Yeah, well, okay. So I never like fully wrapped my head around everything that was going on with the game. I always found the concept like super interesting. So the idea basically, right, is you have a kind of escape the room situation, and your character is one of nine people who's in this kind of isolated detective story kind of scenario where you have to solve puzzles and you have to piece together different kinds of clues to figure out what's going on and how to survive, basically, right? Like,
Hello? Hello?
yeah, yeah. Oh no, did I cut out?
Yeah, just for a second.
Oh, I think it might be Anchor. I'm gonna blame it on Anchor.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, is the first game you're on a Titanic type of ship? Is that right? Or some other?
Yeah, it's supposed to be, I think, the sister ship of the Titanic.
Okay. Okay. So that's like the kind of setting that you're in. And then the later games have like a more futuristic kind of thing going on. Um, I didn't follow them as well. Like, so we don't need to like spoil the story exactly, but there's like time travel and mind control and a lot of wild stuff out there. But what I really liked about the games is that you're sort of given the opportunity to again sort of reflect on like what does it mean to play a game, like what is the moral dilemma that enters into this, and it draws on a lot of like really interesting historical, psychological, just like a lot of stuff it throws in there into the mix. um so I think that again would be like a really cool project, like to think about like how to make a game like that, or if not a game like that, then how to, I guess, tell a story in that way, um, using some of the new media that are out there. Like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think 999 um, is probably the best use of the dual screens on the Nintendo DS ever
Right.
ever. It utilizes it perfectly, and from a narrative standpoint, it makes perfect sense as to why there's like two screens. And the author, I'm going to butcher his name, but Yuchikoshi, something like that,
Uh,
basically designed the entire game around having dual screens. So I thought that was very interesting. I mean, I think, uh, and the way that it just sets up and it all culminates is just perfect in that game. Um,
yeah.
And it's kind of a shame because that since that was a DS exclusive, he could create a story that was able to be told in a very specific way
Yeah.
because of the specific technology that he was using. Now, the second game that came out, Virtue's Last Reward, that also was ported to the PS Vita. So now
Right.
you were kind of strong and you could no longer tell, it kind of limited your choices on how you were going to be able to tell that story. So I think the very impressive thing to me was, at least in the first game, was how he was able to use the medium that he was given and create such a compelling story that made sense and made it such a great utilization of the storytelling tool.
Yeah.
Uh, But yeah, it's funny. It's funny that we were talking about that because, and the YouTube channel, because if I was to do a YouTube channel, that would be probably one of the first things that I tried to like analyze or go through or review, or I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah.
Just because it's so ripe for interpretation. And like you said, there are just so many philosophical theories and even economic theories in the second game.
Right.
Not that so there's just this huge confluence of different theories that are being thrown around, and it really makes you think and reflect and think about the choices that you made. Because I don't know when you cut out, but these games are kind of like a choose your own adventure type deal. So you'll have branching paths, and depending on the decision that you make, certain good or bad things will happen. So
exactly. And things that seem like a good thing to do at the time, when you have more information and you sort of, it like the whole picture comes into focus, like you said, the way it culminates is just like so awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Steve. I will let you go there, but I'd love to have you back on the show later. We didn't talk a whole lot about EarthBound this time, but I think there's always more stuff to discuss. So as I get further into this project, I'll be wanting your collaboration more, and I hope we'll keep in touch. So
all right, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, thanks to you and to everyone listening. Take care.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.